Pairs of eyes turned toward the young woman standing rigid in the center of the marble floor, her cleaning apron still tied around her waist, her cheeks burning with humiliation. "Dance," Isabel commanded again, clapping her hands like she was training a dog. "Come on, everyone paid good money to be entertained tonight." What none of them knew was that a phone was already recording from across the room, and by morning, this moment would end everything Isabel had ever built. Before we continue, if stories about quiet strength and long overdue justice speak to you, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications too, because you don't want to miss how this one unfolds. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Mara Delgado had worked in the Whitfield household for almost 2 years. She cleaned, she cooked simple meals when the private chef had a day off, she folded laundry with a precision that came from years of practice, and she stayed quiet, always quiet, because quiet was safer. The Whitfield estate was enormous at 12 bedrooms, a private pool, gardens that stretched further than some public parks, and Mara moved through it like a ghost, present but unseen, useful but unnoticed. Nathaniel Whitfield, the man who owned the estate and the shipping empire that funded it, was rarely home. He traveled constantly, closing deals in Singapore, London, Dubai, leaving the day-to-day running of the household to his wife, Isabel. Nathaniel wasn't a cruel man. In the rare moments he was present, he treated staff with a distant but genuine respect, always remembering to say thank you, always noticing small details, like the fact that Mara hummed while she worked, or that she seemed to disappear into herself whenever music played on the radio in the kitchen. Isabel Whitfield was a different story entirely. Isabel had married into wealth after a modest upbringing she rarely spoke of and worked hard to erase from memory. She overcompensated in every way possible: louder jewelry, sharper words, colder eyes toward anyone who reminded her, even slightly, of where she used to stand before marrying up. And Mara, quiet and unassuming, reminded her constantly. Isabel couldn't have explained why she disliked the girl so much. Maybe it was the humming. Maybe it was the way Mara moved with a kind of natural grace despite scrubbing floors for a living. Whatever the reason, Isabel's disdain grew sharper with each passing month. It started with small comments. "Can you at least try to look presentable when guests are here?" Isabel would say, eyeing Mara's simple uniform as though it personally offended her. Or, "I don't pay you to hum. I pay you to work." Mara absorbed each comment the way she absorbed everything, silently, swallowing the sting, reminding herself that this job paid for her younger brother's tuition, that steady income mattered more than her pride. What nobody in the Whitfield household knew, because Mara never spoke of it, was that she had spent 4 years of her childhood training in classical and contemporary dance. Her mother, before she passed away, had been a dance instructor in their hometown, and Mara had inherited both her talent and her passion. She had once dreamed of a scholarship, a stage, a life built around movement and rhythm. But when her mother died and her father's health declined, those dreams folded quietly into a drawer, replaced by the practical need to survive, to work, to keep her family afloat. She hadn't danced in front of another person in almost 6 years. She barely let herself dance even when alone, afraid of how much it would hurt to remember what she'd given up. Isabel was planning a lavish anniversary gala, 10 years of marriage to Nathaniel, and she wanted every influential person in the city to attend. Caterers were hired weeks in advance. A string quartet was booked. The gardens were draped in fairy lights, and a temporary dance floor was installed in the grand ballroom. Isabel wanted the night to be remembered, to cement her place among the city's elite, to prove, if only to herself, that she truly belonged in this world of wealth and polish. The night of the gala arrived, glittering and grand. Mara had been assigned to help with drink service, moving quietly through the crowd with a tray balanced on one hand, invisible among the designer gowns and tailored suits. Nathaniel, unusually, was present, having flown back early just for the occasion, standing near the center of the room accepting congratulations with a practiced smile. The evening moved smoothly until Isabel, 3 glasses of champagne into the night and feeling emboldened by the admiration of her guests, spotted Mara crossing the room with an empty tray. Something about the sight irritated her. Perhaps it was Mara's calm composure amid the chaos, perhaps it was simply the champagne loosening whatever restraint Isabel usually maintained in public. "Mara," Isabel called out, loud enough to draw attention from nearby guests. "Come here." Mara approached, tray in hand, unsure what was being asked of her. Yes, ma'am? I heard you hum sometimes, Isabel said, her voice carrying a theatrical lilt as she turned to address the small crowd gathering around her. I bet you know how to move too. Everyone here paid for a night of entertainment. Why don't you give us a little show? A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the nearby guests, unsure if this was a joke. Mara felt her stomach drop. Ma'am, I don't think nonsense, Isabel interrupted, snapping her fingers toward the quartet. Play something upbeat. Let's see what the help can do. She turned back to Mara, her smile sharp as glass. Dance for us. The music started, an upbeat, mocking tune that felt entirely wrong for the moment. Mara stood frozen, tray still in her hands, humiliation crawling up her neck like heat. Please, I really don't put the tray down and dance, Isabel said, her voice losing its playful edge entirely, becoming something colder, something commanding. I insist. Consider it part of your job tonight. The crowd, uncomfortable but curious, had begun to form a loose circle. Some guests looked away, embarrassed on Mara's behalf. Others, emboldened by alcohol and the strange spectacle of it all, began to clap along mockingly, treating the moment as entertainment rather than cruelty. Mara set the tray down on a nearby table with trembling hands, her mind racing for any way out of this that wouldn't cost her the job she desperately needed. Dance, Isabel repeated, clapping her hands sharply, her voice rising with impatience. Come on, everyone paid good money to be entertained tonight. Don't be shy. Mara's eyes swept the room, searching for Nathaniel, hoping he might intervene, but he was across the room, momentarily distracted by another conversation, unaware of what was unfolding near the dance floor. Mara felt utterly alone, standing in the center of a circle of wealthy strangers, being ordered to perform like some kind of party trick. What Isabel didn't know, what none of the mocking guests realized, was that one person in that circle wasn't laughing. Off to the side, half hidden behind a marble pillar, stood Camila Reyes, a young event photographer hired for the evening. Camila had grown up in a household similar to Mara's, and something about the scene, the mocking tone, the forced humiliation, struck a nerve deep enough that instead of looking away, she quietly raised her phone and began recording, capturing every second. Mara, cornered and out of options, closed her eyes for a brief moment. Something inside her shifted. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the years of swallowed pride finally reaching their limit. Maybe it was simply the memory of her mother's voice, telling her that dance was never something to be ashamed of. Whatever it was, Mara made a decision. If she was going to be forced into this humiliation, she would not shrink. She would not perform like a broken puppet for their amusement. She would dance the way her mother taught her, with dignity, with control, with everything she'd buried for 6 long years. The quartet's mocking tune faded into something else as Mara, with quiet authority, asked them to change the piece, requesting a slower, classical arrangement instead. Confused but compliant, the musicians shifted into something softer, something with depth. And then Mara moved. It wasn't the awkward, embarrassed shuffle the crowd had expected. It was precise. Controlled. Every extension of her arm, every turn, every measured step carried the unmistakable mark of real training, years of discipline evident in every motion. The mocking laughter died in the room almost instantly, replaced by stunned silence. Guests who had been chuckling moments before now stood frozen, champagne glasses forgotten in their hands, watching something they clearly hadn't expected. Isabel's smug expression faltered, confusion flickering across her face as the scene shifted entirely out of her control. This wasn't the humiliating spectacle she'd orchestrated. This was something else entirely, something powerful, something that made the room feel smaller and Isabel's cruelty feel larger, uglier, more exposed with every passing second. Nathaniel, drawn by the sudden silence, turned to see what had captured the room's attention, and froze in place as he watched Mara move across the floor with a grace that seemed to belong to another world entirely. He'd never seen anything like it, certainly not from the quiet young woman who cleaned his floors and refilled his coffee each morning. The dance ended with Mara in a controlled, elegant final pose, chest rising and falling from exertion, eyes finally opening to meet the stunned silence of the room. Nobody laughed now. Nobody clapped mockingly. The applause that followed, hesitant at first, then growing, felt entirely different from the ridicule that had opened the moment: genuine, startled, respectful. Isabel, humiliated by the sudden shift in atmosphere, tried to recover her composure. "Well," she said with a forced laugh, "that was unexpected." But her voice lacked its earlier confidence, and several guests were already whispering among themselves, casting uncomfortable glances in her direction. The moment might have ended there, filed away as an awkward but ultimately forgotten party incident, if not for Camila's phone, which had captured every second: Isabel's mocking command, the crowd's cruel laughter, and Mara's quiet, dignified transformation. By the next morning, Camila, deeply unsettled by what she'd witnessed, uploaded the video with a simple caption about kindness and respect, never expecting it to spread beyond her small circle of followers. But it did spread. Within 2 days, the video had been viewed millions of times. News outlets picked up the story. Isabel Whitfield, once known primarily as a socialite hosting elaborate galas, was now infamous for an entirely different reason. Comment sections filled with outrage at her treatment of Mara, admiration for Mara's composure, and speculation about who this mysterious, talented young woman really was. Nathaniel watched the video that circulated online with a mixture of horror and shame. He hadn't seen the worst of it happen live, but watching it unfold on screen, his wife's cold command, the mocking crowd, Mara's forced humiliation, filled him with an anger he rarely allowed himself to feel. He confronted Isabel privately, away from cameras and guests, his voice low but unmistakably serious. "You humiliated someone in my home, in front of my guests, for your own amusement," he said. "And you didn't even know who she was, what she'd survived, what she was capable of. That's not just cruel, Isabel. That's who you've become." Isabel tried to defend herself, insisting it had been harmless fun, that Mara had overreacted, that the internet was blowing things out of proportion. But Nathaniel had already made his decision. Within weeks, the couple's separation was finalized, a divorce that dominated gossip columns for months, with Isabel's cruelty toward household staff becoming a permanent, humiliating footnote to her once glittering social reputation. As for Mara, the viral video changed everything. A prestigious dance academy reached out after seeing the footage, offering her a scholarship to formally return to training, something she'd believed was permanently out of reach. Nathaniel, feeling a genuine debt of gratitude and guilt over what had happened in his own home, quietly funded additional training and even helped connect her with a respected dance company willing to give her a real chance. Mara left the Whitfield estate not with resentment, but with a quiet, hard-earned sense of closure. She continued training, rebuilding the dream she'd folded away for 6 years, this time with the resources and support to actually pursue it. Within a year, she was performing in a professional company, her name appearing in programs instead of household schedules. Isabel, meanwhile, faded from the social circle she had worked so hard to conquer, her reputation permanently marked by a single moment of cruelty caught on camera, a reminder that character always eventually reveals itself, especially to those who think no one is watching closely enough. This story is a reminder that people are rarely who they appear to be on the surface. The woman scrubbing your floors might carry dreams and skills far beyond what you'll ever bother to notice. And the way you treat someone who seems to hold no power over you often reveals more about your character than anything else in your life. Kindness costs nothing, but cruelty, especially the kind performed for an audience, has a way of finding its own consequences. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories about resilience, dignity, and justice finally finding its way home. See you in the next one.